The history, future and significance of the written word will take centre stage at the Singapore Pavilion at the Venice Biennale. Pulp, a short biography of the Banished Book, will take the form of a book, film and paper maze, which is reflected in the design of the pavilion. The exhibition marks Singapore's 10th year taking part in the event.
And joining us with more is artist Shubigi Rao and curator Ute Meta Bauer. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. Shubigi, let's talk about the project, Pulp III. Pulp rather, is a 10-year project, and the pavilion marks the midway point of the project. Tell us more about its premise.
Thank you. Well, actually, it's a 10-year project, as you mentioned, and it looks at the whole history of human knowledge in print, text, storytelling, oral history, right across the globe. So it's many different stories entangled together. Sometimes it's about vanishing languages. Sometimes it's about the importance of print as resistance. Sometimes it's about, just the deep humanity that's there in the act of reading and writing and storytelling. So the whole premise of the project was to find our shared humanity through storytelling, collecting stories, and then sort of distilling them into book and film form.
Shubigi, can you describe to us how the exhibition at the Singapore Pavilion is going to continue that narrative?
Thank you. Well, it marks the midpoint, so it's the five-year mark really, and it's really looking at the whole wealth of stories I've collected. I think a big part of the pavilion is also that people can take away part of the work with them, in a sense, which is the book, the third volume that I've written about my work in this project. And by taking that home, it enters people's personal libraries, it enters their personal narratives, and they then have a more intimate relationship with the book and with the artwork. So it's not just that they go to the pavilion and they see it and experience it at that moment, and then that's it. This is something that lives as an afterlife. And that, to me, is the act of storytelling and also the act of listening, reading, and even watching film.
Ute, let's bring the conversation over to you. Shubigi's work, really intertwines, several narratives into, a complete picture. How do you think it resonates with audiences in this day and age?
I think it's particularly in a time when we are losing the contact to books. We are shifting very strongly to a digital world. I think to be reminded, so many people in this world still are depending on books, and the information is stored in them since centuries. I think it's really important to see the significance of our libraries and access to them. And I think it resonates greatly because fantastically, even during COVID, book sales went up. So I think that's really also a great reminder of our past cultures.
And Ute, I mean, this isn't your first pavilion at the Venice Biennale. How is this project different, though, from the others that you've been involved in?
I mean, to be part of the Venice Biennale is the highlight for every artist in their career. It's very, very special. To represent a country is really another big responsibility, challenge, but also a pleasure. And I think we always try to give our best in a particular moment in time, and especially now when people couldn't gather for such a long time. I think to bring artists from all nations together, but also audiences from all nations, I think will be a very special moment.
Yeah, you touched there on COVID and the pandemic and how that sort of restricts, movement and having everybody back together again. What were some of the challenges, in terms of curating the exhibition that wouldn't have been apparent in a non-COVID year?
In particular, I think you're discussing much more how can we be sustainable also in the art world, the shipping of artworks, etc., and big installations. What resources do we use? And I think it made us much more aware, but we also realized what a privilege it is if we can travel, and we should do this much more aware. And we were really discussing, what are we doing if we cannot travel there? There should be still something for the audiences to see.
And Shubigi, you've said that being the first woman to have a solo exhibition at the Venice Biennale is particularly meaningful for you because women have traditionally been written out of history. What do you hope audiences are going to take away from this project?
Thank you. Well, first of all, it's an extraordinary year at the Venice Biennale because a number of national pavilions, a record number, have women as firsts. So it's brilliant that Singapore's also recognized the importance of showcasing women's stories. I'm very deeply honored and actually humbled by this. But I think I see myself as a vehicle to present the stories of other women and other groups that are frequently overlooked. And this happens quite commonly across the world. I mean, this is something that occurs when the people in charge of libraries and the people who decide that certain forms of history are more important than others. So for me, libraries are actually places of exclusion very often, even though I love libraries. It's because there's, for example, oral histories don't get recorded. Indigenous knowledge forms are not always repositoried. So if it's not written down, it actually vanishes. And because women have been relegated to the periphery very often of knowledge generation, or their knowledge has been disregarded, we've lost 50% of the world's population's knowledge over the years. And knowledge also means fiction, poetry, art, music. I mean, to me, it includes all of this, all architecture, engineering. I mean, there's so much that women have contributed, but you don't hear about it. So it's very, very meaningful for me to be the conduit through which some of these stories can now be highlighted, especially from our region.
Well, ladies, we wish you the very best of luck with the upcoming exhibition. We were speaking there with artist Shubigi Rao and curator Ute Meta Bauer. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.